Evening, and thank you for showing up to this meeting on time. Welcome to this meeting that will focus on our health and wellness in regard to all challenges that education community is facing during this COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to thank the tireless efforts of our hundreds of members in the 14 subcommittees, our teachers, our district staff. Through these Zoom meetings, we are doing our best to interact with parents and community members. Tonight, we're going to have a presentation from Sandra Quintana, Program Manager of Mental Health for MUSD, and Rebecca Cole, District Supervisor of Mental Health Clinician, discussing some of the health and wellness issues that our community is experiencing, and how to try to operate in as close to normal an environment as possible. We know that distance learning provides its own set of challenges for our families, many of whom need to work at home or care for others while trying to help coordinate the children's educations. The stress of staying at home and limited outlet is not easy to cope with at this time for a lot of people. I'm one of them. So at the end of this presentation, there will be question and answer session. Your questions will help the district to find ways to help you better. Because we are limited of time, each parent, please limit yourself to one question, and we will try to have the staff to respond as succinctly as possible. And if there's time left, we will take the second set of questions after. So again, thank you for attending this meeting, and I'd like to introduce Superintendent Jordan at this time. Superintendent.
Thank you, President Leanne. And I appreciate having all of you here with us this evening. The importance of social emotional learning is really at the forefront, and much as COVID-19 has illustrated the great divide in digital platforms, it has also brought to the forefront the importance of social emotional learning because of digital use by our students in particular, as well as adults. And even more so now with the feeling of isolation that we sometimes have, it's important for us to learn the skills that we need to build connection with one another. And in this virtual world that we now live in, it's something that needs to be thought about very carefully, and something that needs to become a practice. So years ago, we started teaching kids how to collaborate with one another because we knew that was something that they needed for their future and also for their own development. Now we need to make sure that we're bringing in social emotional learning in all of our instruction, as well as providing for the needs of our families and our students where we can in relation to education for mental health. And I greatly appreciate the work of Sandra Quintana and Dr. Rebecca Cole in building up our program so that we are able to meet the needs of all of our students and our employees as well. Thanks to Assistant Superintendent Jonathan Brunson, who is bringing on support for our employees, and during COVID, extending that to our students and their families through Care Solace. Sandra Quintana and Rebecca Cole, the platform is yours.
Okay, thank you so much for the introductions and setting really the groundwork for what we're going to go over today. Thank you for that. The end will be a Q&A. We have some activities sprinkled throughout that are based in social emotional learning. So please, as you're watching us and observing what we're doing, we may narrate, we may tell you why we're doing it, and we may also ask you to think how you might apply it at home, or if you are a teacher and also a parent, and that is the case for many of our parents as well now, please think of how it could be used in the classroom as well. With that, we'll go ahead and have Dr. Cole lead us off in a social emotional learning activity.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It's good to see all of you. I want to start with, as Sandra said, an SCL activity that focuses on stress and mindset. Stress, one thing we're all very, very familiar with these days. So I would invite everyone to just take a seat comfortably. If you would like to just contemplate the different questions that I'm about to ask you, you can. If you're the type of person that likes to write things down, that's okay. I am going to give you some prompts and then give you time to think about them. So if there's pauses, that's why. We can all kind of be uncomfortable together, and then we'll move on to the next prompt. So the first thing I want everybody to think about is, what is it right now that is causing you stress? So acknowledge and name what is stressing you out. And the reason why we do this is because when we name stress, it takes it out of our amygdala, the emotional processing part of our brain, and puts it into our prefrontal cortex, which means that we can begin the process of managing stress instead of being managed by it. So the question I want you to ask yourself is, what emotions are you feeling? And where do you feel these emotions in your body? And this is where I'm going to let you pause and think about it. So once you have in mind the emotions that you're feeling and where you feel those emotions in your body, I want you to think about step 2, owning your stress. We only stress about the things that we really care about. So I want you to think about what positive motivation or personal values are underneath your stress. So if it's helpful for you to fill in the blanks for a statement, I'm stressed about blank because I deeply care about blank. So I would say, if I were filling in the sentence for myself, I would say, I'm stressed about reopening because I deeply care about creating healthy environments for children. So take a minute and think about how you would fill that in. And then the last step is to use your stress. So we want to think about how we can leverage stress to achieve our goals and to connect to the things that really matter most to us. So are your current behaviors in line with the values underneath your stress? Can you make any changes in how you're responding to stress in order to better meet your goals or fulfill a specific purpose? And if you can, is there a way to channel your stress as energy to make the most of what's happening now? So as you think through your answers to these questions, when this is all over, did you live in accordance with your values? And did you make the most of this opportunity to learn and grow personally, to connect with loved ones, and to prepare for the next time that we face a crisis? So I'll leave you with those thoughts at the beginning of our time together, and to think about how you might encourage these types of questions in your children as students approaching a very uncertain school year.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So that is what we call a warm-up or welcoming social emotional learning activity. Get you ready, sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today. And we'll dive into the next piece, which is looking at the resources that we have developed and that are on our website. And I will attempt to share my screen. Okay, so we have put together wellness, mental health, and social emotional resources through Educate Everywhere. There's also a link under parents and students to mental health resources as well. So if you click on that, you will have some sampling of the resources that are in Educate Everywhere that will stay here as we move through Educate Everywhere and that website. So these are the home social emotional learning resources, community mental health, local crisis, LGBTQ, self-care, and I will go over these in more depth once we go into Educate Everywhere, but also wanted to let you know that you can access them through the parents and student link up here. And there's also the information regarding Care Solace for our students, families, and staff. That is a care linkage or care concierge service to find therapists if you are in need of more support. Going back to the homepage, I should have had this queued up before. If you scroll down to Educate Everywhere, you will find the link here to link to all the resources, and I already have it queued up. So what you'll get is this screen right here that has all the resources that we've compiled for many different areas. This is Wellness Tools and Resources that was created by our school psychologists that has tools for students with special needs, as well as wellness tools for all students in our district. This second tab right here is for our wellness and mental health resource folder. There's a whole folder here with home resources. There's an aware stress management resource here, CDC mental health and coping, community mental health services and resources, coping with stress, and then those other ones I mentioned before, LGBTQ and local crisis ones, we'll look at those in a moment. And then we have our schooling services social worker created some videos for how to engage in mindful breath and breathing. So these are readily accessible to you to use for yourself or for your students. There's also school social emotional learning resources for our teaching staff and our other district staff. Self-care resources are for all. These are for students, families, as well as staff, as well as some other links that have been linked from our county for resources like the stay-at-home care package, how to support in isolation and when terrible things happen for adults. On the right-hand side here, we have more county resources that are in various languages. So if you'd like to share them with members that do not speak English. And we had a question today about this, and we'll go into a little bit more, but here's some guides for how to talk to students and children about COVID and how to use developmentally appropriate language and things like that. This is also another link from our special education local planning area for resources for families. And we'll go through this one in a lot of depth today, home and social emotional learning resources. So the first one I'll briefly guide you through is self-care. And again, you can get there through clicking here under the Wellness Mental Health Resource folder. So self-care, we have some bullets here on ways to basically take care of yourself and that are good reminders to us all. So taking time each day to notice what you're feeling, checking in on your self-talk, and a host of other points here on things that have been researched and well known to help encourage wellness day to day and to help you take care of yourself. So self-care is not just bubble baths, it's a host of things you can do and plan for yourself each and every day. This is a graphic that talks about several areas of self-care that you can engage in. And then there's also links to free, oftentimes, and especially now, mindfulness apps, websites, articles and activities with tips of things you can do, journal prompts. I really found this article very useful. That discomfort you're feeling is grief. And I think that headline says it all. A lot of what we're feeling right now is definitely experiencing loss after loss, and that can be attributed to grief, and grief can come in many forms. There's self-care for teachers, self-care for parents, webinars, if you have the time and availability to do so, to look at webinars that will promote resilience. Workouts, that's definitely a part of self-care. So some free workouts that are online, and also daily activities of things you can do, such as random acts of kindness, card games, calm box, which Dr. Cole, if we have time today, we'll review later. Touch is an important part of self-care. Mind dump is a interesting way, but it's a descriptive way to talk about getting all our thoughts down in one place. 20-second hug, dance parties, someday soon jars, and daily questions that are good during this time, but also every day. Our local crisis resources are just that. They're for resources that are local to us here in our county. So these are if you do find yourself in a life-threatening situation, which hopefully is not the case, but these are accessible to you with mobile crisis teams in our area. So these are all local, as well as hotlines. There's also abuse and protection numbers here for Child Protective Services, as well as adult abuse lines, California Social Emotional Supports and the Youth Crisis Line. And then a host of national supports here, like the Teen Line. They've adapted a lot of supports to be available via chat or texting now, which is really helpful and more useful and accessible for our teens. Domestic violence has unfortunately taken a rise during this time in COVID-19, and they have a chat now feature as well, as the disaster distress helpline and for LGBT youth. Moving into LGBT youth, these are supports that have a lot of use and respect and really acknowledgement in the field for being helpful among our LGBTQ youth who are the most at risk for at-risk behaviors and concerning behaviors. So there's a host of resources here, including, if I could get down there, under gender spectrum, there are many online teen groups for many different groups. So there's Black trans, there's preteens, there's also ones for adults. So for parents and for, I believe at one point there was a grandparent one, there's also ones in Spanish. So those are just something to note in terms of supporting our LGBTQ youth. And there's a whole section here for parents and allies. In our community resources, we have the table of contents up here as to what is included in this document. So there's warm lines. Those are different from hotlines in that it's not an immediate crisis concern, but it's someplace you need to go to talk to someone. And there's lots of different ones that have different emphasis on what they focus on. So there's a parent helpline, there's substance abuse, there's mental health generally. We have websites with resources, virtual parent support groups. There's also parent, educator, and student supports groups, information regarding substance abuse. There's online suicide prevention training you can actually take right now if you are interested in that. Grief resources, so not just grief information, but actually looking into services, special support resources for grief during this time if you are affected by COVID, or like I said in the beginning, we're all in a state of grief in some degree right now. And I also added this during our time this summer of unrest. There have been much more community support for services for our Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And here is a host of resources for students, families, staff who want to go to and receive support from people who look like them. And there's different supports such as healing circles as well that have been found to be useful for our students and families and staff. So that is the community mental health. And then lastly, this is where we're going to be focusing a lot of our information today, is on home social emotional learning. So, and the resources here are listed directly related to developing and deepening relationships. So that's number one, is relationships. Positive relationships are the most important protective factor for our students in their mental wellness. That's at home, that's in the community, that's at school. So each of these areas are ways to develop those relationships with your students at home, and direct activities that you can apply as well. I will take a little bit more time, if you'll allow me, to go through actually each section of this. I promise I'm not going to read word for word. I just would like to give you a glimpse into what's in here. We're actually going to show a video in a little bit around what is social emotional learning. There's been a lot of use of SEL, social emotional learning. It's in the news. It's in a lot of, coming back to school, speech and language. And we just want to really nail down a common understanding of what social emotional learning is. So when we're talking about social emotional learning, we're looking at this circle here of self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So the warm-up activity that Dr. Cole did today focused a lot on self-awareness. Where are we? How can we have time, build in time for self-reflection? I know that I often don't build in enough time to my schedule. So that's where embedding these activities every day for our students and every day at home is really useful to make sure that we're doing it as well. Because social emotional learning, first and foremost, starts with the adults. And there's just more descriptors of what each of those areas are. We have the video that we're going to watch in a little bit. The importance of social emotional learning and the fact that research has confirmed all of this. The second part is social emotional lessons at home. So this section includes more packaged actual lessons that you can deliver with your students at home. And so these are provided by companies at this current time, either at low cost or free, oftentimes. So these are some social emotional learning activities that are offered by companies right now. The Choose Love at Home is from Sandy Hook Promise. All of these have evidence-based to them. So they are very useful for what, I need an activity to do at home. What can I do? Here are some resources for you to be able to just take and go and just click on the link, and you'll have many lessons at your fingertips. Aperture Education has made parent guides in both English and Spanish, and Cassie, an agency we contract with at our secondary level for social emotional supports, created some care kits in April and May, and then Harvard Graduate Education, School of Education, has some as well. This next one is kind of the real take and go. You can just come right to this document and find something that you can do right then and there. I find this Wholehearted School Counseling, actually Instagram, and she also has a Teachers Pay Teachers, but her Instagram has lots of useful visuals for how to engage in social emotional learning at home. There's the, how are you feeling today when you're not sure what to say to your child or your teen. I feel, for example, lonely. So here's a whole menu of things I can do corresponding with how I feel. Here's some examples of what to tell myself when I'm feeling discouraged. There's also examples of how to listen with sympathy versus empathy and why that's important. Statements to avoid, for example, don't worry. That kind of it's dismissive. It's evoking that you're listening and that you understand what the speaker is saying, but it's not validating their concern. For example, the replacement would be, that's a big worry. I get it. So that would make the person really feel heard instead of, okay, you actually factually heard what I said, but you're not really listening to what I'm saying and how I feel. So these are just some examples of how to phrase things so that students and children and adults in our lives, our partners, our friends, our family, feel heard and feel validated. These are other examples of communicating empathy down here. And they can be really simple. How irritating, what fun. So you're really putting a label, you're helping students identify what the label of their feeling is in that moment. So you're actually helping be a teacher too, as well as validating. These are examples of actual things you can do at home that will help in that connection, that will help deepen that relationship with your student, with your child. So family meetings, I know that that's something that's maybe, oh yeah, that would be great to do. But in practicality, who has the time? It's awkward. We never really do this. Who eats dinner together even more, even though we're around each other all the time? It's a good thing to start with, especially because what we're going to be encouraging our classrooms to do are classroom meetings. So if they're having that at home and at school, it's going to become a natural part of life. And ways that you can do it, you don't have to make anything up. Here's some conversation starters. There's conversation starters right here. There's sample questions right here. There's topics right here. You can play the good behavior game by asking every member of your family what they'd like to see, hear, feel, and do more or less of. And there's an example of how to build a family charter if you really want to get bonus points for how does this family want to behave? How does this family want to represent itself? How does this family want to feel in our home every day? So, and diversity, there's examples of how to include diversity in your home. Movies and books. If we have time today, we're going to click into Nixie and Nimbo and show you a really cute short video on how to talk about emotions and feelings, mainly anxiety, with your students. The value of unstructured play, encouraging your student being an upstander, and how to model and teach certain things about how to really embody social emotional learning. For example, and these are just 4 examples down here: positive self-talk, visualization, chunking it, and deep breathing, that you can go a little bit more into to really, you can, and whatever you hear today, this might be a lot of resources. It certainly took me a lot of time to compile it. So looking at it is probably like, whoa. Take whatever you need from today. If it's just one thing that you want to look up later, awesome. You don't need to take it all in today. Just know that it's there for you whenever you need it. Positive behavior interventions and supports. Some of your school sites are doing this. So Burnett, Sinnott, Rose, Randall, Rancho, Kirtner, and Pomeroy, they're all doing some version of positive behavior interventions and supports. And so these are ways that you can tie at home directly with what your school site is already doing in terms of teaching behavioral expectations. It's really simple to just ask your teacher, can you tell me what your classroom matrix looks like? And you can just change it to home. And that's a really easy way to not have to reinvent the wheel and to be able to teach your child behavioral expectations in every part of their day, including at home during meal times, how they interact with Zoom or their siblings during playtime, things like that. And I'm just going to go a little bit more quickly over these. And if there's folks that would like me to go back into them at the end, feel free to drop that in the chat. These are also just introductions to mindfulness meditation, also more applications and websites. A parent highly recommended to me this Cosmic Kids Yoga. It's really easy, really simple to just put on a YouTube video and to do it with your child, to have your child do it on their own. Phrases that you can use to help calm your anxious child, and exercises as well, like deep breathing and things like that. This is if you would like to do some more exploration into your own education around social emotional learning and mental health with webinars, classes, and live sessions. There's a multitude of them here. Play is so important. And so here are some ideas of activities to do to engage your child in play, as well as printables and worksheets. If you would like to, if your child is more tactile and likes to color or likes to draw, and you have a printer at home, you can print these out, or you can adapt them to Google Docs as well. That's just as simple to do. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I left this in here because there are still really useful links here that you can find, daily things to do or examples of things you can do with your children that encourage daily mental health. So for example, one tip of the day might be find a new place to walk, something simple like that. Okay, and that is my explanation of those resources. Do we have any questions so far about those resources?
I do have a question. You have Spanish and English. Do you have any plans to have this in Vietnamese?
So unfortunately, what we're able to post right now are what the different resources have developed on their own, in terms of Spanish guides. So a lot of the companies that we've gotten resources from, or websites, or, social emotional learning leaders, we've been utilizing their guides at this time and compiling those. I think that would be a great idea to translate some of these into different languages so they're more accessible to our parents. I do constantly update this, so we'd have to work hand in hand with our translators to make sure that it's staying up to date. So that's a great question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I will hand off to Rebecca for that video we were talking about.
Sure, and before we start the video, I would just like to acknowledge all of the work that Sandra has put into creating this resource. I know this is an ongoing task, and every time I look at it again, I'm just amazed at the time and energy that's gone into it. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And like Sandra said, we talk about SEL. It's one of the many acronyms in education that we throw around, and we think everybody knows what we're talking about. So today we're going to try to step back a little bit and define that with a brief video for what SEL looks like at home. So please be patient with me as I navigate the technology to be able to show this to you.
Directly following this video, we will be answering the questions that we got in the Google Forms.
Dave, I am being asked to put something in. Let's see if that works.
We can see your screen, Rebecca.
Thank you.
As parents, we know that there is more to raising a child than teaching reading, writing, history, and math. Raising a child means that schools and parents must work together to create safe and supportive environments while helping children to understand themselves, understand others, and make responsible decisions.
It's important for children to see that they have role models that aren't always the ones that they expect to have.
You know that saying that parents are the first teachers, that's very true, because I think that as a school, there's only so much that we can do.
I think parent involvement in school is huge because I think it's really important when kids feel the partnership that their families have with the school. And so we work to have structures and systems in place that will help kids be able to do those things.
Social and emotional learning, or SEL, is how children and adults understand and manage their emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions.
When adults are modeling SEL for students, whether it's parents or teachers or staff members, they're really building relationships with one another, which ultimately impacts how they work with one another as adults.
I think it's really important for them to be self-aware. I think being able to identify their emotions and deal with them, it's sometimes really important to be able to stop and reflect.
We're intellectual, emotional creatures. To learn the skills necessary, one has to have both a healthy internal life and external life. And so being self-aware of that is really critical.
First of all, we have to learn how to manage our stress ourselves.
How to deal with stress. In today's society where everything just seems to go 90 miles an hour, you have to just take a time out yourself.
I mean, it's important to be shown to him that there's different ways to deal with stressful situations.
Teach him how to deal with emotions.
Like, did we give them the skills to be able to handle conflict or resolve conflict?
When kids are able to process their own feelings, acknowledge what's going on with others around them, not only for others, but for oneself, right? Forgiveness and what led to this? How might I do this differently?
They have to have a sense of empathy. They have to have respect for other people, other cultures.
I want him to learn how to interact with other kids, how to play, how to cooperate, how to do things together, also have fun.
I think that has been the best thing with my relationship with my daughter, that she's able to communicate well with others, speak her feelings.
That's important because the world around us is all about relationships. Our children need to be able to guide themselves through there so that they can achieve those things that they need to achieve and be able to communicate them effectively.
I'm always thinking about how are we potentially impacting students in a way that will make them think twice? Like, how are we helping them make good decisions?
He's starting to understand that why do one thing instead of another, and how it affects other people. Explaining to him his actions have influence on his quality of life.
I think our children need to be able to be confident enough to articulate what they're feeling and to be able to just showcase their strengths.
Those 5 competencies apply to being successful anywhere. That's the kind of employee I'd like to work with. That's the kind of student that I'd like to have in my classroom. That's the kind of person I'd like to study with after school.
And that helps build a positive climate and environment that sets the tone for learning.
Research shows that SEL can have a positive impact on school climate and promote a host of benefits for students, including better academic performance, improved attitudes about school, fewer negative behaviors like office referrals or drug and alcohol use, and reduced emotional stress.
Every child can reach their full potential and are provided the supports and the resources that they need to reach that potential. My hope would be that families are engaged and feel welcomed at the school and can get the resources that they need through the school.
In order for students to meet their full potential academically, I think that their social and emotional needs need to also be met.
Social emotional learning is something that people can learn and that we can help to teach that. My wish or my hope is that schools see themselves as places of support for kids and families and community.
We are their #1 role model. Between modeling and direct engagement in their education and direct engagement with the school and the teachers and participating, the parent's the #1 educator. educator from day one.
Those strategies that mom and dad share with them are also the same strategies that schools have shared with them.
As students learn social and emotional skills, it's important that they have opportunities to practice and apply those skills in real-life situations, both at school and at home.
One of the ways that parents can help children at home through the use of social emotional learning is to connect with the school.
Whether it is attending local school meetings, parent-teacher conference, emailing their teachers, I think it's just important in whatever way you feel you want to engage to do so.
Parents can help bring SEL into the home in many ways. Here are 5 examples to consider. For self-awareness, take time to talk about feelings with your child every day by sharing your own feelings and asking your child to name their feelings as well. For self-management, teach and model positive ways of managing stress, disappointment, and anger. For social awareness, use story time to develop social awareness by asking your child how they would feel if they were in a similar situation as the characters in the story. For relationship skills, develop your child's ability to resolve a conflict by asking questions about the situation instead of giving advice. For example, try asking, "What do you think your friend was feeling when that happened?" Or, "How can you work to make things right?" And finally, for responsible decision-making, talk to your child about consequences by asking questions like, "What might happen if you choose not to wear your coat if it's cold outside?" Or, "How might your friend feel if you choose to cancel your plans to get together?"
Social emotional learning helps us because it brings us all together.
Social emotional learning is a journey we're all on until the day we die. We're all striving to be the best person we can be.
My hopes and dreams are that my students just are able to fulfill their full potential in life.
We need every child to be ready to take on whatever the world brings them. And social emotional learning and the strategies that teachers use to garner that will enable our children to get there. I just want them to be ready for the world and take it on and take it by storm.
For more information on social and emotional learning, go to castle.org.
So before we go into questions, does anybody have any comments or questions about the SEL video that we just saw? Anything resonate with anyone? Wow, that video was so compelling that we're all speechless. I love it. It's great. Everyone is just taking it in and thinking about it. Wonderful. This is great news.
I appreciated the ending part of the video where it showed the diagram and talked about the importance of social emotional learning and that it's something that is actually a life skill that benefits the learners in all aspects, including work and family.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for that, Cheryl. We appreciate it. So we want to get into questions as our next step. Sandra?
Yes, we have about 10. One we were a little unclear on, so if you happen to be here and can provide clarity and we didn't answer your question, please raise your hand and let us know. So the first question we got are, kids are in need of support groups for social isolation while going through hardships and transitions in life. What will be available for them? So in terms of just practically answering this question, each school will have teams that are looking for how to address students' needs in the classrooms, or sorry, I should start bigger, school-wide, in classrooms, in smaller groups, and then if needed, individually. And so that can look very different in each student, for each student's needs. So for example, if a group is needed for anxiety or for social skills, we are looking actually into having virtual groups this year run by our school-based mental health staff, as well as continuing our teletherapy with one-on-one counseling services for students. We also have site-based teams called student study teams or student success teams, as well as the PBIS or positive behavior intervention and support teams that are looking more globally at the school to see where can we actually build from the bottom floor, from universally, everybody gets these, which is why we showed the SEL video and those practices and tools, so that we can prevent the students from needing more intensive services that take them out of the classroom. As a parent, you are also able to refer if you think your student needs more individual type services and connect with your school site to do that. And the subcommittees are also working on ways to plan for individual connections between teachers and students and individual check-ins so that we can keep abreast of what the student needs are before they get more serious or severe. So I really want to encourage you as parents to reach out to your teacher to see if any sort of outside school time or school groupings or pairings could be appropriate. And as parents, you can arrange those as well in terms of social groups. Becca, do you have anything to add?
No, I think just if you are unaware, I know in the beginning of the year, you get a lot of information, and this year's no exception to that. So if a couple of weeks down the line, you're just not sure how to access the support at school, your student's teacher is a great first step to reaching and accessing more services that we have here.
Okay, number 2, do you want me to read it to you?
I can see it as well. So
Go for it.
So the second question is a very specific question. The person who wrote the question is curious about how to support children when their parents are going through divorce and multiple stressors, with the concern for how this as an additional stressor is going to impact their growth. This is more proof than any of us need that life continues on even in a pandemic. So I think I have accessed an article from NYU Langone that kind of gives a little bit of context for how to, and some practical tips for how to handle divorce and COVID. One of their recommendations is to increase the frequency and clarity of communication between parents and between parent and child. In terms of the way the parents relate to each other, to reimagine that person as someone that you need to collaborate with in order to get through a crisis. So conceptualizing the role or reconceptualizing the role in order to make sure that you can actually work together in this way. And to agree on what should be considered risky behavior, especially as relates to children seeing other children or where they go socially and how they conduct themselves outside of home. And then also to agree on the parameters for screen time. What media is consumed, what social media is consumed, in what ways and how often, just to make sure there's consistency. I can put the whole article in the chat if people are interested. We also, as was mentioned in the beginning of this call, have access to Care Solace, which is again a way of linking parents to mental health resources. If you feel like what is happening at home and navigating a divorce is something that's too difficult, it's a good idea to help to enlist a mental health provider to help you on that journey together as you kind of figure out how to get through this time, whether it's the pandemic or anything else that's happening. And then also just to remind us what we saw in the SEL video. So when we're talking about increasing the frequency and clarity of communication, are we giving children a space to talk about how they're feeling? Are we modeling and encouraging ways for them to regulate their emotions? Are we engaging in conversations where we problem solve together? So these are all things that are going to become much more important during a really stressful time. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that, Sandra?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're rocking and rolling. Third question is, what are some resources to help children be social with other children during 100% distance learning? I thought this was a great question, and it's probably one that's on many of your minds. How do we have students in a place where they can socialize with each other? At this point, we're going to speak more to virtual activities that you can do so that the students can continue to engage with each other socially. Oh, do I have an echo? Okay, that's gone. We want to help set up for students if they're younger or even if they're older. What are some things you could say to your friend on a call, on a FaceTime, on a house party, you know, on those applications, like so that you can help them increase the scope of things that the depth of things they're going to speak with their peers about, because we're speaking again about the importance of relationships here. Peer relationships are just as important, especially at middle and high school. You know, you could be chopped liver as a parent, especially as students get older. The first person they're going to talk to is a peer. So it really helps if you can help model or engage them around what are some things you really are interested about your friend? What are some ways you wish you could connect with them more? And you can role play and model types of conversations that could happen between the friends when you're setting up a virtual call or house party or anything else. You can coordinate mostly for younger students. You can help coordinate with other parents to set up games or crafts together online and get a whole virtual room doing the same activity, or just having craft or playtime. So if one student's doing a puzzle, another one's drawing, another one's, you know, painting, that's a really great way to just have together creative time. Same goes for any sorts of games or crafts. Perhaps there's online, and there might already be accessing this online games that they can play together at the same time. And not just games, but following it up with some sort of, let's all have pizza afterwards, after we've played our games, and talk. Let's set up more time for connection, not just seeing each other face to face, but really making those impactful relationships even deeper. Book club is another idea. Other ones I've seen that actually neighbor districts have used are virtual scavenger hunts. And I did this actually with our psych crew during the end of the year, in terms of something to get them up and moving around, and you can make it really fun. You can make a theme around it. You can be like a camping theme, and everybody has to dress up in their 90s and bring a camping chair or a little candle or tiny little marshmallows and s'more kits. And they can come up with the themes. You know, Babysitters just came back on Netflix. It could be a Babysitters Club night. I'm dating myself here. And then the last one I have here is a type of interactive game you can do is an online bingo. And so there are many, and everything I'm referencing right now, there's tons of examples online to Google, and I can put a couple in the chat at the end, but where you're all playing together and you can make the bingo as fun and adventurous or as kind of mundane as you want. You know, someone who has, you know, had Popeye's delivery while in you know, shelter in place, you know, and then you can mark off that box. So whatever makes sense and is engaging for those students or the children or the age group. Perhaps there's a student leader in that group that wants to help create it. I think that they're super fun and really creative ways that you can engage in these types of activities. Any other ones to add, Dr. Poole?
I think the drill down with that is helping kids to understand and establish commonalities that they have with each other. Because I think right now it's very easy to feel like this is bad and it's only bad for me. We feel that as adults, and I think our kids do too. So to the extent that you can have them say, you know, wow, I do really miss going back to school. I really want to go back to school like normal, like nothing is changed, and be able to say, yeah, me too. Because when they can establish that commonality, they can also find a silver lining. They can also find resilience. They can also establish a coping skill together that they're going to try and then tell each other about it. Well, when I get sad, this is what I do. Or, you know, when I get really scared, these are the things that I do. And in that sense, they can learn from each other and grow from each other and strengthen the relationship. That will help to decrease the sense of isolation that they have and help them to make the most of the situation that they're in right now.
Absolutely. Thank you. The next question we have are, what resources do you have to calm children's fears about COVID-19? At the beginning of this, I showed you a folder that had lots of different ways to talk to students about COVID-19 and about the pandemic, but I'll go ahead and highlight a few while we're here. So the number one thing is remain calm and reassuring, because children at any level are going to respond to your energy. If you're stressed out and you're anxious, they will pick up on that, no matter what kind of state you're in. So the best thing to do is to center yourself before you have that conversation, or find an appropriate way to express your emotions to them too. You know, sometimes it stresses me out too, and this is what I do when I'm stressed out. And you can then talk about a coping tool. But really, best for your first conversation to do whatever you need to do to get yourself into a very centered place, and then engage in a conversation with your students. You want to stay informed on your own, but also monitor yours and your students' news and social media intake. I know for me, I can reach a certain threshold where I feel my heartbeat rising, and I feel my stomach hurt, and I get really, anxious about the amount of things going on in the world, and that is my cue to disconnect. So really talking to your student about identifying those feelings in their body, identifying what emotions are coming up for them if they're online all the time, and maybe helping watch them and see, and if you actually see their emotions raising and their agitation increasing, help cue them, what's happening for you right now? What were you doing right before then that could have maybe caused what you're feeling right now? So that's also another kind of background thing while talking to students about the pandemic and about COVID-19. We always want to be honest, accurate, and developmentally appropriate in our language in how to describe things to students. So for elementary, lower elementary students, we want to keep it really simple and brief, and really end with the message, adults are really working hard to keep you safe. Upper elementary to middle school, we want to really help with separating out the rumors from the facts. And unfortunately, there are a lot of rumors out there right now about masks, about COVID-19 existence, about other countries and how they're dealing with it. So we really want to engage. It's an appropriate time to start engaging that critical thinking around what is a safe news source and what are the rumors to question. And then you always want to end on the hopeful note of, this is what our school is doing. This is what our community is doing. This is what the district is doing to keep you safe. For upper middle school and high school, you can engage even more in those conversations about how to find resources and news sources that you trust. And here's how to be a critical consumer of, how to check against reliable resources to see, was that a rumor? Can I trust this information? And also how to treat each other with respect. We can get even more into that social awareness, relationship making pieces of the SEL pie with how would we want to be treated? How do we want to treat others? And you can really engage in that discussion, and then ending with how can we do our part to follow the guidelines. Overall, the suggestion is to just continue using every opportunity as an opportunity for connection. So if you want to be really intentional about it, you can take a time during the week and say, okay, Wednesday mornings, that's mom and child time. These are the times where I'm going to answer questions if things come up, or we're going to do a puzzle. We're going to watch the videos we like to watch together on TikTok. Whatever it is, that's a shared joint interest, but it's making specific special time for your student, especially if they have heightened anxiety around this. So they know they're going to have a time one-on-one individually with you. Even if they're not going to seek it out, they know they're going to get it. And we want to keep our routines as normal as possible, and practice and encourage healthy routines always, and narrate as much as you can, especially with the younger ones. I'm washing my hands right now and I'm singing happy birthday out loud, and I'm going to do this for 2 happy birthdays because I'm getting the germs out, so as much as we can narrate what we're doing, especially for the younger kiddos, the more they'll internalize that themselves. Rebecca, anything else to add?
Such a good point with the narration. I mean, I think even as something as simple as saying, okay, we're stopping the car now, it's time for us to get out. Let's put our masks on first before we get out of the car, before we go into the store, so that it's not unusual to them, it just becomes a routine. And I think the other thing to remember is that this is a point in time. We need to remind ourselves of that too. It's not forever, and it's not great, but we've gone through some other things in our lives that have also not been great, and we've gotten through them. So it's okay to pause every once in a while and to reflect on that. What did you do to get through a challenging time? What do you do when you have to go through a challenging time? And to remember that we're resilient and that we will get through this situation just the same way we've gotten through challenging situations in the past.
That actually leads really great, Leah, into the next one, which is what resources do you have to help children calm themselves?
Yeah, I had to move for the sun, and my Calm Box stuff is all, so I'm going to move again to be where my Calm Box resources are. Hopefully the sun's not in my face again. So, oh, we're not going to get lucky today. Oh, Calm Boxes are one of the things that we recommend for helping children to calm themselves down. And essentially, what you want to focus on in a Calm Box is ways that kids can have sensory experiences to literally help them re-regulate their breathing and their heartbeat, because when they're re-regulated, then they can solve problems, they can get perspective on things, really just get back in a space where their emotional mind is not the mind that's in control. So this is going to be different for every kid, what their preferences are. And when I was going around trying to make one today, there's a million resources online that you can consult to make a Calm Box. A lot of classrooms have a variant on this called a Zen Zone or something like that, where kids can go if they're just starting to feel like they're getting really upset or they're overwhelmed, they're dysregulated, they can go, they can take a few minutes to themselves, calm down again, and re-engage. So considering distance learning, this is something that can be replicated in your homes too. And again, if you are the kind of person that's like, if it exists on Amazon, I'm going to get it, that you will not be disappointed. But I was also just trying to think about things that you could find at home, because sometimes there's a lot of fun in that goes into it. And sometimes that's the resource situation that we have currently. So I was just thinking about some of the things that I have in mind. And realizing that I did not have a box, which was very strange because Amazon and I have a great relationship right now. But some of the things that I have in mind are, I'm very sensory, smell is a really big thing for me. So I'd have candles, I have perfume, I have coffee, really, really rich coffee. So when I make it, I'm really intentional about making it, and then I'm really intentional about smelling it before I drink it. When I worked in residential treatment, we had kids that were really sensory for warmth. So we would take a blanket that they really liked, put it in the dryer with a dryer sheet for a few minutes, and then they would wrap up in it when they really needed to calm down and re-regulate. I also have headphones in mind too, because I like to listen to music as a way of re-regulating myself. If you have Epsom salts, really good for a sensory, to soak your feet in, and they also have a smell to them too sometimes. If you have rice around the house, something that you can put in a dish so that people can put their hands in it and just have the sensory stimulation from that, or put into a plastic bag and into a sock. That way it becomes something that you can kind of squeeze. Kinetic sand is also really great for that too. I stole this from myself from my office, but it is a dot to dot, which is very, very soothing to kind of zone out and get out of your head for a few minutes. So those are just some things that you could put into a Calm Box, but essentially it's about noticing when your child is becoming dysregulated or upset and saying, you know what, I think now is a really good time to use your Calm Box for a few minutes. I'm gonna set the timer for about 5 or 10 minutes. You can go over here, you can use the Calm Box, and it's okay to use it with your child if that's what they need, or they can use it by themselves, dependent on what's gonna help them access it most efficiently. But you wanna give them a length of time, could be 5 or 10 minutes, and then help them to engage in a conversation about what's going on, what is the issue, what are we feeling, what are some things we might try to make it better. Right? So it doesn't need to be a lengthy conversation, but it is about validating what is making the student upset, or what is making your child upset, validating, repeating back what you hear. Oh, you're upset because that assignment that you just got from your teacher is very hard. Okay, tell me more about that. What's making it so hard? Oh, it's hard because it's a lot of words and they're really hard for you to read. Okay, maybe we could try to read some of those words together, and then you can go back and try again. Is that a good solution that we could try together? Right? So it's connecting to a feeling, and then it's coming up with some strategies to try together and kind of talking through the process of implementing that strategy and seeing if it works. Sandra, do you like my calm box?
I love your calm box. I need to go make one of my own too. And I think that's actually a good tip too, is make your own. Each of you and your family can have a calm box. And then just like we were saying, you can narrate out loud when you might need to use it. you know, I'm having a really stressful day right now. I'm noticing that my heart is racing. I'm noticing that my hands are shaky. I think I'm going to go use my calm box right now because I'm really feeling like I need to start to calm myself. Or if you're both in a certain place, let's go do a Cosmic Kids yoga video, or let's engage in some deep breathing. But back to the box, I think it might be really useful for each family member to have one and to normalize using those types of skills and tools, and then saying out loud when you might need to use them yourself so that the child can start to do it for themselves over time. Okay.
I have a question.
Please.
Mm-hmm.
Can I go now?
You can.
So what is your suggestion or recommendation with a child who has problems and then try to sleep through the day and gets up and stay up the whole night to avoid talking to parents or siblings? And since parents and that child speaks different language, so it's a language barrier, that was the reason why she avoided talking to the parent. And became very difficult because if we say we're going to interact, engage in helping, talking, playing games, in this case, it is impossible to communicate. How can we help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's you certainly found a very challenging case to present to us, and I appreciate the challenge. So I think, yes, that's a significant barrier for language, but I also would think about ways of connecting that are not reliant on verbal communication. So are there shared activities that people like to do together that they just do in the presence of each other, right? And in that time, that in some cases can break down a barrier between someone wanting to engage. I'm just going to guess that this person that is sleeping during the day and awake at night is a teenager. Just
Yes.
Crazy.
Not even a teenager.
Okay. Okay. So
10.
So step 2 is understanding that circadian rhythms are shifting, so that is the natural rhythm for sleep at that point in time, and trying to be really sensitive to that. And as relationships are starting to form over things that are neutral, right? We want to go and say, you need to be doing this from this time to this time, and that's all we want because we have high expectations for our students, right? But in this case, form the relationship first over shared neutral activities. Try to find ways of just short, brief communication. What do you need? How can I help? Right? Using Google Translate if you need to help to form that communication, just so that very basic things. Do you need help with something? Are you feeling okay? Are you sick? Right? Like just so that basic needs can start to be met. And that's kind of your foundation for taking off from there. And then the specifics about the time frames, I think like the psych in me is like, let's sit down and have a conversation about this, because there's some really probably really specific and tailored interventions that I'd want to run to and kind of build out, knowing more about the specific situation. But I'm going to pass on to Sandra and see if she has any additional insights that I haven't thought about.
I think that's great. I think you hit them. I think the shared interest or leaving bids for attention, so that's kind of a concept that comes out of the Gottman Institute around romantic relationships, but it actually can be expanded to any sort of intimate or meaningful relationships with each other. So making bids for that other person's attention that are going to capture it. So in this case, if it's parent to child, if you know an interest that child has, leaving something out on the kitchen table just for them, you know, using Google Translate to write them a note saying something like, I miss you, I'd like to talk to you, and not at first expecting much of a response, unfortunately, but just being persistent, consistent. Maybe the language isn't verbal. Maybe it is using Google Translate and writing notes back and forth to each other. Maybe it's a tic-tac-toe game, you know, something where they're interacting and gradually broaching more of an interactive relationship. The key is to keep being persistent, and anything we can do to help that particular student's circadian rhythm shift, you know, making things more conducive to sleep at night versus day, because there's probably things that are in place during the day that are helping them sleep. Maybe there's blackout curtains, maybe there's other things as well. And slowly but gently removing those things that are assisting them in having that kind of topsy-turvy schedule.
Yeah, they've tried. They've tried to, you know, be patient and communicate. It didn't work.
Okay, we can talk more offline.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. That is a toughie for sure.
Yes,
for sure.
Looking at the remainder of our questions, they all seem to have the essential theme, which is basically our children have needs. How are we going to meet them? Is there going to be enough support for them at school? Are there going to be counselors? How have we embedded, you know, providing for the students' social emotional needs and mental health in the schools? So Rebecca, I'm kind of making an executive plan to just kind of consolidate a lot of our questions into, yes, we are thinking about their social emotional needs. In fact, in many of the subcommittees, the majority of them, social emotional learning and mental health have come up as something that we need to plan for as a staff. And actually, as the facilitator of the Student Social Emotional Support Subcommittee, we have various recommendations for parent support, teacher support, and student support, and when we all come back to school on August 13th. I'm going to reiterate that social emotional learning starts with the adults. So the more that we can take care of ourselves, put our masks on first, in this case, our oxygen masks, the better we can care for our students. The more we learn about how to demonstrate each of those 5 competency areas ourselves, how can we demonstrate emotional vocabulary around what we're feeling? I know myself, and I would hazard to guess most of the people in this room didn't get that modeling from their parents. It's just not something that was part of our vernacular. It wasn't something that was done. And of course, their parents didn't do it for them. So this truly is the first generation where we're trying to instill social emotional learning as a norm. So first and foremost, we have to, as adults, take it on to educate ourselves and to model and to teach, but also to be forgiving of ourselves, because we're learning too. We didn't get this when we were younger, and we really are, it's something that's a daily practice and process. That's what social emotional learning is utmost described as a process of learning. So we're never really done, right? We're always growing. So that's kind of what we are envisioning when we look towards the beginning of school, is asking each of our school sites to have daily practices, and we're going to have menus of all the sorts of things you can do for social emotional learning. And as you've seen, they can range from family meetings to comm boxes to just engaging in conversations and check-ins with students individually that meet many of those social emotional learning competency areas. But first and foremost, as adults, we're going to train ourselves up, get educated, model, and we want to partner with parents in that as well. Rebecca, do you have anything to add?
Just that we're really trying to have this be part of the culture of the adults in our meetings, in our trainings, so that it is not something that's, oh, I have to plan something like it's exceptional. This is just how we are. This is the culture of our school district. So I think as adults, the momentum is there, and then to bring that down to our children when they come back to school.
Yes, absolutely. And then to continue to have supports for students who need more. You know, we want this to be part of their everyday, is talking about emotions, naming them, engaging in critical conversations on how did I do in my relationship skills today, or social awareness. If there's a think, pair, share, or group activity, you know, engaging in some pre-thinking beforehand. What are my values, similar to what Dr. Cole presented in the beginning? What are my values I want to live today? How can I choose to show that in my class or in my activity or in this writing assignment, whatever it is? And then how can I, at the end, evaluate how well I did and where I need to continue to practice? And if I need to continue to practice, where do I go? Who can I go to that can help me with that? So we really want that to kind of just be the natural flow of education, even more than just taking a curriculum off a shelf and delivering it, just even embedding it into how we function, how we work, how we do things. And it's uncomfortable at first to shift to being vulnerable as adults and really opening ourselves up and saying, you know what, I was really nervous about this parent Q&A today and was hopeful that I was going to be able to meet your needs. And that shows that I care. And that means, and I can always, have people in the room to help support me. So modeling those things, that we're human, we all have this huge range of emotions. And an interesting side note is that we have far more vocabulary words for negative emotions than we do for positive emotions. So we're much more comfortable expressing when we're angry, sad, frustrated, rather than embracing joy and happiness. So it's also important to name our joy and to name our positivity and things that we're grateful for in life as well. It's just so interesting to me that that's what our language really has. I think that captures most of the questions we had. Does anyone else in the room have other questions that we did not answer?
I did not see any hands raised. So do we have any questions for Rebecca or Sandra?
Okay, well, if not, I have one more resource I'd like to share. Oh, I'm sorry.
Norma and Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I actually have a comment and thank you, gratitude for both Sandra and also Rebecca for their commitment and they're true troopers and advocates for the importance of the social emotional. And I have to be honest with you. For me, I'm a very task-oriented person, and usually the emotions are sometimes get in the way. It's just like, let's do. And I've been reflecting a lot about how challenging COVID has been for me, because there's lots more to do, and it's so different to do it. And I've been, thanks to the two of them, I've been reflecting a lot about where is this coming from, this do that, and I think that the movie, the video that you showed us, is that we as society are always on the go, and we forget to stop and to connect to the essence of our humanity. And COVID, as much as we are very upset about how disrupted our fast pace of life, has forced us to, in a way, slow down. But I think that what is happening, at least in my reflection, is that we want to continue to do what we were doing fast, and we can't. And that's where the stress comes up. And I think that I am thinking that what we do is we are deflecting that on the ones that are around us, and specifically on our children. And so they're feeling and that slow down. And the reflection and the gratitude. And what I've noticed is when you do that, you become more creative. And I'm wondering if our kids are having an opportunity to be creative. Because creative releases a lot of, it frees your mind to be creative. And just writing a song, writing, a riddle, writing, or any type of creativity sometimes also heals the emotions. And I just wanted to share that because it's a vulnerable place, and sometimes you see everyone that they have it together, and it's been quite a challenge. Absolutely. I almost had tears when you had us reflect and write down how we're feeling, and I wrote it down, and I noticed that I had tears, and I was thinking, why am I feeling this way? It's too emotional. but it's because we care. We care deeply about the children that are entrusted on our care, and we care deeply about their parents, and we care deeply about our teachers and our staff that that are here to provide those services, and it's frustrating not to be able to continue to do so in the way that we're used to. I thank you for taking the time to be here and for providing the forum for us to learn some tricks and ask some questions and know where the resources are for us to go back and use them.
You brought up so many relevant points in what you just said. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And I think, you know, yes, we want to go back to the way things were, and it can be very uncomfortable to cling to that. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that that's where we all are, or where we might find ourselves. And then just to kind of step back and say, okay, what am I trying to do here? And I think, you know, to your point, are the kids able to do this? Well, I think they will be if we can help them frame it. Right? Like, what does it look like this year to be a good friend to your friends? It means I want to hug you and share my things with you, but I'm going to be a good friend to you this year by not doing those things, and by this is what this looks like. And to also help them see that in a time where things are changing, they can be creative and they can also be resilient, because there now is an opportunity to redefine what it looks like to be a student. Yeah. So we can sit and cling to where we were last year and what it looked like and try really hard to get that back. Or we can say, what is it going to look like this year to be a student? What does that mean for me? And what behaviors am I going to engage in regardless of where I am and all the uncontrollables that are around me? Because it's important to me to be a good student. That's the frame that I want our students to have this year.
Yeah, I second that, Dr. Cole, and thank you, Norma, for sharing. I think something you named too that was highly relevant is we're also going to have our bad days. We're going to have those days where we tear up at lots of things and we maybe can't explain it, and that's the grief. That's the underlying grief of missing what was, of feeling that sense of loss, of normalcy, of having to engage with our loved ones in different ways. So it's also okay to be like, you know what, it's one of those days and I'm going to tear up, and I might even go watch something sad that makes me cry, and I'll feel better about it, or whatever you need to do, because I've found that to be helpful for me during this time too, is just to embrace the feels and let them move through me and know that tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you unmuted yourself for a second. I wasn't sure if you had a question or a comment.
Thank you both for your leadership and taking this on. And I just wish there was a lot more people here tonight, but we're busy, right? And I think with
we can't hear you, Jonathan.
Why is that? Can you hear me now?
Nope.
You're a little bit better.
By the time we hear him, his mouth is going to be right here.
I don't understand, because is that better?
Yes.
You just muted yourself.
I know, sorry. Hey, I think, you know, tagging up what Norma said, and I'll get to my question real quick, is, you know, the new normal is you are working in isolation. We're used to working with people all around us, and yet the work is just as hard, if not harder, because of technology, and it's all funneling at us and coming at us. And so I can imagine what the kids must be feeling and what we all must be feeling. So I guess the question is if there's a chance that throughout the year that we can do these sessions and people can come in and be together with you, and would you be also open to maybe going to school sites to be part of a staff meeting to support them, if as long as it's calendared with your team and what have you, so that, because as leaders, we don't have all the skills that you guys have in presenting and just the wealth of information that you have. And I'm just thinking that it would really be beneficial to our adults, and then they can practice these things with kids. I see the resources online and we can tap into that, but nothing beats people like yourselves presenting and getting the opportunity to interact.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we'll take that as a very high compliment.
I mean it. And
I think what we'd really like to do, I mean, I won't speak for Sandra. I'm not opposed to it, but I think what I really would like to do this year is to empower teams to have the capacity to support themselves, right? Which doesn't mean I'm going to be like, good luck, because I'm just going to be, you know, at my house in with my comment box. But it does mean like modeling SEL strategies so that they can use that in their own staff meetings, and modeling SEL strategies or regulation strategies or a routine that has infused mindfulness throughout the day so that teachers can take that in their classrooms and feel confident to use it. So I think that's kind of my visioning this year. And whatever that support looks like from me, I'm happy to do it. But again, I'm one person, and there's a district of incredibly talented professionals that I would love to be able to see do this work, because I can't be all things to all people, but they have access to a wealth of knowledge, passion, and talent. So I'd like to be able to develop that.
Yeah, I second what Rebecca said. I'm more than happy to help leaders and staff develop their own skills so they do feel as confident as we do presenting. We didn't start here. You know, social emotional learning was not something I actually learned in grad school. This is something that I self-educated in, of course, because it's my passion. I became to know it better. But it does take practice, and we'd be happy to give those opportunities to practice, even if it's just with us or helping model at something. And then, of course, you know, giving them the tools so that they can do it themselves, because that's going to be way more sustainable throughout the rest of, you know, the year and years to come. But yes, we are definitely willing and able to help our staff and students however we can. That's why we're here. We have about a couple minutes left. Do we have any other questions or comments? Give it maybe a few more seconds. Okay, then we'll go ahead and stop with and close today with an optimistic closure, which is again another embedded social emotional learning strategy that can be at the end of meetings, at the end of lessons, at the end of game time, whatever the end is of that particular thing you're doing. And the example I'm going to use today is of reading a quote and asking, as I read it, for you to reflect on it, to take some mindful breaths, to use your belly breaths if you can, put your hands on your belly, and just inhale deeper and exhale deeper so that we can regulate that nervous system that Rebecca was talking about that let us off at the very beginning of this. I'm going to read a quote from Dr. Emily W. King. Working, parenting, and teaching are 3 different jobs that cannot be done at the same time. It's not hard because you are doing it wrong. It's hard because it's too much. Do the best you can. And you have to pick, because at some point you will, choose connection. And I'd invite you, if you would like, if you have any reflections, to either unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. And if not, just continue with your deep belly breaths. And reiterating what we led with today, if you took just one thing today that resonated with you, that's all you need. Just one thing. For President Han Lian, is there any way you'd like to wrap this up?
Thank you so much. I've learned so much watching the video, listening to both of you. I think I'm going to start practice breathing and reflect on the things that happened yesterday and see how to better it today and moving forward to tomorrow. And I'll do meditate. Thank you so much.
I love that. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.